Hello and welcome to Smart Film Filmmaking. My name is Fergal Sanderson. I'm making this as part of Crinan and Oak Warford 2020. I'm breaking this up into three sections: pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is everything that happens before you start rolling, before you start shooting your film, before you're on set. Production is everything on set, it's the actual filming of the movie. And post production is everything afterwards. So it's editing, doing sound, designing titles, all that nice stuff. There can also be reshoots within post production, if necessary. Best to avoid them if you can, though. So the first part of pre-production is getting your idea. Now your idea can come from anywhere really. A lot of ideas for films come from the filmmaker's personal experience, something that happened in their life, or they base a character around someone they know, or it's just something that interests them even. Say someone is interested in racing, car racing, for example. That will lead them into making a film about car racing. That's probably a very simplified version of it, but there it is. Other things when you're kind of struggling to come up with ideas is to watch movies, seeing what's been done before. There's a fly in here. See what's been done before and try and not just copy that story, but see what you like about it. What are the things that the story kind of brings up that are interesting to you? And try to do your version of those ideas opposed to that story or that film. Same goes for reading. I think I became a better filmmaker when I started reading more. When I discovered H.P. Lovecraft, it was kind of like a new boost into my filmmaking. It was something that, like, a lot of the ideas in his story, a lot of them I deeply dislike, but a lot of them are interesting. And I've noticed that a lot of the films that I liked were films that took from his writing. But also just generally reading improves writing as well. Stephen King once said that if you do not have time to read, you do not have time to write. So once you have your idea, you need to start writing. So there's kind of two things that you should be aware of before you start writing your script. One, well, they're both in a way technical. One is story structure, and the other is script formatting. Now, story structure is more. It's technical, but it's more of it's like how things fit together in the story. It is like what happens to your characters. Do they follow an arc? Do they start as one person and end up as a different version of that person? Have they matured? Have they accepted loss? Have they succumbed to temptation? Have they died, for example? That's the basis of what you get from story structure. The most common story structure is the 3-act structure, which you've probably already heard of. So the 3 acts are setup, confrontation, and resolution. I'm reading these. I know them, but not while I'm being recorded, I don't. So setup is you kind of establish the world, you establish who our characters are and where they are, and kind of what their needs are. What else is established in the setup is the things that get in the way of our characters' needs. What are the problems? What other forces are kind of in conflict with our hero, to stop them getting what they need or doing what they have to do. One example of that would be an antagonist, or a villain to our hero. Antagonist, villain, protagonist, hero. After setup, we have resolution. No, we have confrontation. Confrontation. This is where the problems get solved. This is where our hero faces our villain. This is near the end of the film, but not quite the end of the film. Like, the setup is a huge chunk of the film, and then confrontation is this relatively small compared to the first part. So this could be a case of, this is where the hero is learning something about themselves, if it's not necessarily a villain. Say they're dealing with some problem in their lives, and they're kind of like figuring out how to solve that problem. That's what it is. That problem could be a villain, but it could be some other aspect of life. Then the final part is resolution. This is where everything is resolved. We see the change in the characters. We see the aftermath of the struggle beforehand. This is where everything gets kind of wrapped up in a neat little package, so to speak. So that's story structure pretty much wrapped up nice and easily for you. The next thing I want to talk about before I move on to script formatting is exposition. Exposition is basically what you use to let the audience know all the information that they need to fully understand your story. So, there is a general rule in filmmaking, and it very much applies to exposition, which is show, don't tell. So if you can give the audience information without just having either a narrator or an audience or a character just explaining it, that's better. It's more interesting. Or the audience can feel like they're kind of figuring it out, like you're giving them hints and they're putting that information together. So say you want to, say in some part of your film, one of the side characters has, like, say, a heart attack, but your main character is a doctor. Now you could just say that, just have the character come out and say, "That's all right, I'm a doctor," and then they look after them. Or earlier in the film, they could be shown in costume that reflects that they're a doctor. Costume can be used for exposition. Props can be used for exposition. Say someone has a medical condition that comes up in the story. I don't know why all my examples are going to be medical based, but I suppose they are now. You could have either there's medical equipment around their house. There's they could be on a drip, or they could have loads of medication beside the bed. Just visual things that the audience can pick up on that informs the story. Show, don't tell. A good example of a film that did the opposite, kind of told instead of showing, is the 1930s Dracula. Now, that Dracula was based on the stage play of Dracula. And there's scenes in the film that one of the characters basically looks out the window and goes, "Oh, there's a bat flying through the air." And like, so we just see a shot of someone telling the audience what's happening off screen. That was a lot down to just sticking to the stage play, but it was also down to budget. It's better to try to make a film that you can show and not tell, because it's more interesting. If it kind of comes down to know your budget, know your limitations. So when you're coming up with your story, come up with something that you can feasibly do. There's an element of push yourself. There's loads of tutorials online of how to do effects on your computer and all that. You can do mad stuff with green screen fairly cheaply. But generally try to just write what you can do. Don't push yourself too far into so that you're relying on some effect that could be awful. That kind of went off from exposition, but it's a valid point. So we'll move on. I think I covered exposition enough. Okay, the next point I want to make is, just leading into script formatting, is the difference between a scene and a sequence. Now, when you're watching a film and there's this big elaborate chase, a lot of people refer to that as a chase scene, but more accurately it's a chase sequence. You see, a scene is basically what's happening at one time in one location. So if there's one person, two people having a conversation in a room, and then it turns into this kind of brawl, and one of them runs out the room, down a hall, and out the front garden, and then down the road. The original room, the hall, the garden, and then down the road, they're all scenes. But the whole chase is a sequence. The reason I'm making the distinction between scene and sequence is there isn't a formatting rule for sequences. There is for scenes. We have a thing called a scene header. So we're talking about formatting now. Yay. Exciting technical stuff. Each scene starts with a thing called a scene header or a slug line, which is, I've drawn them here. Please excuse my writing. It's not very good. It's broken up in 3 parts. This part here, it says int or ext, which is interior or exterior. And this part is your location, where it is set in the story. So I have kitchen here, or I have bedroom here, and here we have day or night. So these details are based on what it is in the story opposed to where you are filming it, and that is a distinction I make for a simple reason. Sometimes you end up shooting a scene that's set at night during the day. You could be shooting it inside and you have the windows blocked out, so it looks dark, but you're actually shooting the day. Other examples are, you could be shooting something inside and pretending it's outside with the use of a green screen. But on the script, it will still say what it is in the story opposed to what it is in the reality of filming. Right, so we're going to talk about a website called Celtex. Celtex is a free script writing website. There's an app on your phone, so you don't have to boot up your computer necessarily to do it. It is handy because it does the major bit of the formatting work. I just kicked my cat in a tripod. Don't ever do that. if you're working camera. So it looks after most of the formatting for you. It has a little drop down menu that says scene heading, or it says action or character or dialogue. So if you're writing action, you click the action thing and you type in your thing. You press enter and it'll give you another line of action. You want to switch to writing dialogue, so you type character, put in the character's name, press enter, and then you're given the kind of almost the box for dialogue. So it's really easy to do. It's kind of self-explanatory, so I don't want to get into it too much. But what I will get into, just briefly, is what is action and what is dialogue. So dialogue is the obvious one. It is whatever a character is saying. It's speech. Action is pretty much everything that isn't speech. So if someone walks across the room, that's an action. If someone shoots another character, that's an action. If a pen falls off a table, that's an action. If a bomb explodes, that's an action. If someone pats someone else on the back, that's an action. Hundreds of thousands of different things are action. That you basically know how to format a script. Besides for that, there's a title page where you just write in the name of your screenplay and your name. There, you know how to write a script. So we're going to have to move on to other parts of pre-production. Casting. You're probably going to be limited here on who you can cast because lockdown is the thing. So whoever's nearby, try to cast them as best as you can. In this sort of situation, you're stuck with how many actors you have, so you could probably write for who you can cast. Generally, it comes afterwards, but in a situation like this, it's best to write for the character, write for the actor. Besides for all this situation going on here, a good place to find actors is drama clubs. If there's local ones, I'm sure there's plenty in Waterford that I know of. Just listen. You're all Waterford people. I've not been living here for a year or two, so you'll find them yourself. Locations, obviously, you're kind of stuck inside, or you're stuck within a certain area of your house. But generally, with locations, you need to, when you're picking a location, you need to kind of look at your script, and you need to think what is needed of this location. Say you have a character that comes in one door, looks at a window, goes out a door, another door. You're going to need a location that has the two of those doors. You're probably not going to have money for much production design, so if they need a kitchen table, you probably want a kitchen that has a table. Yet again, because of the nature of this, you probably want to write for those limitations. But going forward, when you have kind of more freedom to go about, you can find different locations that suit it better. So the next thing is kind of a big one. Shot list, very important. Shot lists are basically a document that you write beforehand that makes your job on the production part, the shooting part, a lot easier. It's basically a bunch of columns, and on the first one it says like shot number, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. Second one is like shot size, so this is whether it's a close-up or a wide shot, like shot over the other side of the room, seeing the whole room. Medium, which is like waist up, I think. It's depending on who you ask, the shot sizes are different. So it has that information. There's also one for movement, so whether the camera is static, like on a tripod, like my phone currently is, or whether it's on, if it's handheld and being moved about and, like, movement. You understand the concept of movement, I'm sure. But it could be also on like a slider or a track of some description, or on a jib, which is there's like big professional jibs that are like their own motorized vehicle almost, that has a big arm on it. There's also smaller ones that you can buy relatively cheaply that goes onto a tripod, and it's an arm and your phone is here and you can kind of move around in all angles, and so there's all that sort of movement. So is there like panning, which is just, I'll try to do it now, this tripod isn't very good. This is kind of panning, tilting. I'll loosen this, tilting. We generally don't zoom in it. What we have is the word is escaping me, but you like moving closer. Generally, you want to move the camera closer opposed to zoom. You can change lenses and all that on other cameras, but we have a static size lens on a phone. So if you want something to be bigger, you move the camera closer. You can actually buy small little attachments that you put on your camera, and you can get different like focal lengths. I'm not going to get into focal lengths, but if you know what it is, you can buy those, and great. And then the last thing in shot list is shot description, and this is basically the bit that kind of ties your shot list to your script. It is kind of like what's contained within the shot. So it's like, this is the bit where character A says a line of dialogue. Fairly simple. So when you have that shot list, that makes your job a lot easier on set. If you're shooting by yourself or you're shooting with a crew, everyone in the camera department and whatever can have this, and it's there like, oh, okay, we're on to this next. So you could be off, if you're a director, you could be off talking to the actors whilst the camera crew is setting up the next thing, because they know what the next shot is, because there is a shot list. After that, we've got two things that are not necessarily as necessary, but I would advise you getting. The first is a mood board. Now, a mood board it's kind of something you could do at home, and I suggest you doing, because it's fun, and you're basically, you use the mood board to get across kind of the aesthetic of the film. So if you were getting someone to help you make the film, like you're the director and you have a DOP, which is director of photography, or cinematographer, the mood board kind of helps you get the stuff from your head into something visual that you can just show them. So I was making this kind of sci-fi-ish horror movie sometime last year, or was it really early this year? I cannot remember. Time has gone wandering on me. But I kind of created these collection of images that kind of show what I want to do, what effect I want to achieve. So it's there, like, if you have a particular idea how you want your location to look, you can find pictures online, do some Googling, throw it all together. It doesn't matter if these are copyrighted images, because they're not going anywhere public. Just have fun with it. Definitely advise it. The next thing is a storyboard. Storyboard is basically, you draw all of the shots that you want to tell the story with. It's easy as that. You'll have a little thing that you're like, right, shot one or whatever. Yeah. It's handy, because you can have it on set. And you're like, what's this? Oh, remind me of this shot one. Oh, what does that look like? It's this setup. But I don't have to explain it. You can just go like, it's this one on that. Just frame it like that. and it's easy. It's handy. You can generally, if you have a DOP, you kind of run through and work the shot list with the DOP, and same with the storyboard. And there might be a storyboard artist if you're not particularly good at drawing, or if neither of you are, or whatever. So next is rehearsals. This is more necessary on bigger projects. It's kind of like, if you have loads of dialogue, it's probably best to do rehearsals. If you're working with actors who've done acting before, it's a good place to kind of get to know them and give them a better understanding of how you want the story to turn out before you end up on set. It's good for that. Now, call sheets. This is the boring bit. This is the bit that you give off to an assistant director if you have one, but you're probably not going to at this point. And to be honest, you probably get away without doing it at this point. If it's just you and your actors and maybe another person in the house shooting this, don't bother with call sheets. But what they are is, it's basically a big sheet of information that is very useful for everyone on set to have. So it says when everyone will be arriving on set, what time they're due in, their work time. It also says stuff like where the nearest hospital is in case there's something goes wrong, or what's the number for the producer or director, kind of when the lunch time is if it's on a more professional shoot, all sorts of information. It also says something like, this is the last day shooting for whatever actor is finishing for that day, so that everyone will give him a nice applause at the end, him or her, a nice applause at the end. Not necessarily needed for starting off, but a skill worth having. Okay, so that is I want to talk briefly about production design, and then I'll kind of wrap up pre-production. This is basically like making your production designers are kind of like, if you go to study film, you're not going to really learn production design. It's a separate thing, but it's handy to know a bit of it. So this covers costume, like practical effects. I apologize if you can hear this tiny dog snoring. Costume effects, set dressing, set building if you're going down that route, makeup, all sorts of stuff. It's kind of like, in pre-production you have to think about it. If you have someone to do this and you have a budget for set dressing and costume, great. Otherwise, just kind of pick out whatever clothes you have for your family members that are actors or whichever that suit the character the best. Right, we're starting production. You have your script written, you have your actors casted, you have your locations picked, you have your shot list made. Let's talk about some of the basic rules of filmmaking. These are just kind of short tips that you should really follow. There is one thing that people will always tell you to avoid, and that is crossing the line. And this isn't to do with controversy. This is literally when you have two actors speaking in a room, you kind of draw an imaginary line from the head of one actor to the head of the other actor. And you keep the camera on one side of that line. Because if the camera is flipping either side of that line, it can make it confusing for the audience how exactly things are positioned in the room. Like, if you kind of have to cross the line because of the layout of the room or whatever, if you have a good establishing shot at the start, you can kind of negate that a little bit. The establishing shot is literally a shot that just shows the space. So it could be like often in films, when they're arriving in a new location, they have like big shots showing off the city or whatever, and you might have a card saying like Vancouver or de Janeiro or whatever it is. Um, so it would establish that you can kind of slightly get away with it, but it's best to try to not cross the line. The next one is the 30-degree rule. Now, the 30-degree rule is pretty simple, and it's used to avoid jump cuts. Jump cuts are like really obvious cuts that a character just kind of goes, and they're just like in a slightly different position. A jump cut is effectively when the camera is within 30 degrees, hasn't changed orientation from 30 degrees from where the previous shot is. It's just like, it just takes people out. It's moving past 30 degrees kind of hides the cut better. So if you're set up here, you just move the camera more than 30 degrees and it's a bit less jarring. Slight change of location for this section because I had to go back and re-record it for audio reasons. Everyone came in to the house, so it was getting noisy, so I came up here to where it'd be a bit more quiet. Right, so I'm going to talk about directing for a period of time. So the first thing the director needs to do when he or she is on set is a thing called blocking. Blocking is basically telling your actors where their movement is going to be, where they're positioned there. So if they're by a window, you're going to point at where by the window they're going to be, or if they're walking across the room, kind of the rough path. That information needs to be figured out between the actors and the director. And also, I would advise having the DOP involved in that conversation. Either way, you need to the DOP needs to know all this information because that will decide where exactly the camera is going to be. It also affects what sort of movement it will be, whether you're going to have to end up turning it into 2 shots when it was going to be 1 shot, all that. So that's the first job. After that, I have to tell you just kind of how to direct. Talking to actors it's its own method. Generally, when people first approach directing, they're thinking, right, I want this actor to be sad. This is a sad scene. The character is sad. The actor must pretend to be sad. It's not quite how it works. You have to kind of, instead of just like stating an emotion or saying like, do that but bigger, yes please do that again, you kind of just give the actors something to do. You're kind of like, if you want them to be sad, you could kind of tell them that the process, talk to them about the mental processes that the character is going through. Because if they can imitate the character better, if they have a better understanding of that character, it's the situation that will trigger the emotion opposed to them trying to fake it. Because if they're trying to fake an emotion, then they're just going to look like they're faking an emotion. They're going to either overact and be like, oh, I'm so sad, or just be like, I am sad. They're going to do a very fake version of it. When actors are basically putting themselves in the position of the character and they have the mechanisms to kind of put themselves into the same losing the word here, going through the same problems and issues that the character is facing. They're like feeling them. You will get more naturalistic expression from the actor. You'll get something called micro expressions. Floorboard keeps clicking here. I'm hoping it's not being picked up. Basically, it's just like if you watch like a serious drama scene, you'll often see like little slight ticks in the face and little like things that you can't really just fake. You lose that when your actor is only getting the direction of be sad. When you get the tell an actor that your character is trying to figure out, try to come to terms with the fact that they've just lost this other character. They're trying to figure out what is happening in this situation. Or instead of someone saying, all right, you are angry at this character, you are trying to convince this character by belittling them that they are wrong, opposed to, yeah, you're giving out to them. And there's a difference there. There is a link to a book. I'll put the title in the description. It's basically all about this in particular. It would be super hard for me to get into this and talk about it in a few minutes. If this sort of directing has piqued your interest, definitely look into it. I think it's called Directing Actors. I can't remember the name of the author, but she did a great job of writing it. Technical things to do with camera. You're shooting on a phone. Phones have two cameras. I'm currently using the selfie camera, which is the exact camera I would recommend you not using while making a film, for two reasons. The camera on the rear of the phone is generally a better camera. It's more advanced. It has more technical capabilities, and it's just a better picture. The other upside of using that camera is you've got a screen facing you when you're recording. You can see what you are shooting, which helps a lot. Is actually the reason why for this, because I'm recording myself, I'm using the selfie camera. Try, if you have access to, or you can get cheaply, get a tripod. Tripods allow you to not have to hold. See, I'm not holding this camera. And better ones allow you to use tilt and get movement in there. One of the good things about stabilization equipment such as a tripod or jib or a slider or anything like that, anything that stops it being handheld, reduces how much shake is in your video. Shake kind of almost distorts it. It's hard to look at. You won't really notice camera shake all that much while you are filming, which is a big downside. But once your film is on a bigger screen, all you will see is the shake because it's so distracting and horrible looking. So there is, if you want loads of movement, if you want camera to be moving around constantly, there is stuff you can get like shoulder rig that you can put your phone on and move it around. You can also just kind of make your own thing and improvise. There was, for filming on a camera, one thing that for filming handheld on a camera, one thing I've done before is my camera is currently on a clip that I've attached on the tripod. It's like the clip is like a couple euro online. You can get this like tiny little tripod with a phone clip on it in deals for like $150. But I attached that clip onto a boom pole that I have, and I just, because my hands are further away from the camera, it's making it shake less, so it's a clearer picture. You can make your own stuff as long as, if you make whatever is holding the camera heavier and has it that your hands are further away from the camera, there's less shake and it'll look better. So do that. I'm not going to go into the whole calling all the technical terminology for cameras. I think I've given you enough as a good start to make your films look a bit better. I will supply stuff about composition. Generally, a lot of videos and stuff online for composition are more based in photography. Like, filmmaking is an extension of photography. There's rules. I'll give you one quick example of a rule of composition, and that is the rule of thirds. So basically, if you divide your screen, so it's like like in thirds. So thirds like this and a thirds there. The kind of the points in which they meet. So it's like there's like a point here, 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 and here. If you put something there in one of those, the human eye will be drawn towards it. So it's kind of more aesthetically pleasing, and your eye is drawn to my face more if it's here than if it's dead center. There's, I'll put in a thing with better examples than what I can do in this face to camera thing. There's other rules such as the rule of odds, which is basically like things look more aesthetically pleasing in odd numbers. If you're taking a picture of trees, if there's 3 or 5 of them, it looks better than if there's 2 or 4. I don't know the science behind it, but it is based on how the human brain comprehends things. Moving on to sound. Sound is kind of... Sound is important. Sound is a lot more important than you might initially think going into filmmaking. And I'm kind of going to divide this into 2 bits. One is if you have a separate mic, and one is if you don't. So if you have a separate mic, you're basically, what you want to do is you want to get that microphone as close to the source of the sound you want to record without it being on camera. That's why there's the boom pole with the mic facing straight towards the source, which is the actor's mouth. There is... But if you have a built-in microphone, you're going to have poor sound. It's pretty much unavoidable. You can kind of do stuff in post-production that kind of makes up for it a bit. Like you can re-record lines of dialogue off camera and kind of dub it. Which some people frown upon, but it's a tool that you can use and it can be helpful. I'll get more into stuff like that later. One thing that you definitely want to get on set is something called Atmos. And Atmos is basically a recording of the sound of the room. So whatever sound recording you have, whether you just set your phone to sound recording and you just put it in the room, and you basically want to get a recording that is going to be recording in that room or space that is going to be at least the length of your scene in that room. So if you're going to have like all of a 5-minute film set in one room, all one scene, you're probably going to want to get it, for safety, get like 10 minutes of it. And then check it, and if there's anything randomly picked up, like if some crew member made some weird noise that you didn't notice while recording it or whatever, just do it again. It's really worth having for the edit. Yes, that's kind of the basics of sound. There's not a lot I can tell you that can help on phones in the actual on set thing without a separate mic. Other things about separate mics and just mics in general, I suppose it applies for in your phone. If you're outside, wind sounds horrible. So there's things to do. If you know where the microphone is on your phone, you can kind of block it off a little bit. There is, on microphones, they often have like on a boom pole, and just kind of the pole coming into this thing, and the mic is on it, and the mic is inside this kind of shield that's covered in like hair, and it's called like a blimp. And this blocks the wind, but the sound of dialogue and other stuff still can come in. They can be expensive, but there's... I have a friend that was recording a podcast outside, and all he did was just... He had a little hand recorder, and he just put a hat over it, and it blocked out the wind. I'll thank him for that example, because it just saved my skin there a little bit. So another little thing on set is simply... have food and water for your actors and crew. This is probably fine at home because you've your kitchen there, and you've either bought the food yourself or your family member has bought it, and schedule breaks for them as well. We're in the home stretch of the video. So we're going to talk about post-production, which is, to remind you, everything after you finish shooting. So, post-production. You gather all your files together on whatever you're editing it in. There are editing apps that you can get on your phone. Adobe do a version of Premiere Pro called Rush. It's kind of expensive. There's other ones that are it's kind of expensive because it's like a subscription thing. There's other ones that have cheaper subscriptions with less functionality, and I believe there's a few that are just like you have to watch an ad every so often, or you just spend money up front. I know iPhones. On iPhones there is iMovie, which is it's a grand starting point. It is designed for beginners, so I suggest just go for that, or whatever the equivalent is on your phone. A few tips for editing. Generally, if you can there's a thing called editing on movement. So editing on movement is this idea that if you do cutting on movement. If you cut whilst something is moving on screen, whether it's the camera is moving or the character is moving, it hides the cut better. Basically, if someone is walking and then the camera angle changes, it's almost like you don't notice the cut. Like, it's there and it's obvious that it happened, but it's not like, oh, there's a cut there. You forget about it. It kind of glosses over it slightly. One that I kind of stress is if someone is going through a door, cut whilst the person is halfway through the door. Open the door and they're going through the door. Don't do it before they go through the door or after, because otherwise it's just going to be, oh, there's movement, and then there's the door opening and going through, or it's just there like an empty door and someone walking through it. Also, watch continuity. It's actually something I probably should have brought up in the production end. Basically, just if you have two shots that are meant to be at the same time, the actor should be doing roughly the same thing. Different angles kind of hide a lot of this, as in, like, if your face is like here, if the actor's face is like here in one and then it's there in the other shot, it'll probably go a little bit unnoticed. Generally does with the changing of angle, it makes it less obvious. Hence the jump cut that I was on about earlier, which I've just given you an example of. So yeah, avoid jump cuts. Moving on to post sound, so that's post production sound. Here we have, because audio is so important and because you are limited by probably having a built-in mic, there's ways of kind of negating that a bit. One is re-recording audio. So if you have to redo a voice, the Atmos track that you have played under it will make it less like obvious that the voice has been put in, because it's like still playing over the sound of the room, opposed to it just having room sound like, and then it's suddenly just dead and then a voice. If you're going to do like just re-record dialogue, I would suggest making a space that you can do that. Find the quietest room in the house and get a big blanket and cover yourself in the phone over and record it there. There's things that you do in post to sound that people who don't make films don't necessarily know about. There are people whose entire job it is to just re-record sounds in more controlled environments. So if you're watching a big Hollywood production, or watching a film that's just properly made, all the footsteps you hear are generally recorded separately. They are they find like the right shoe on the right material and stepped on the right material, they get the sound that is best for the film. In a film, when there's guns going off, they're generally not the sounds of actual guns. There is just stuff like, there's been stuff like people have hit a barrel with a metal pipe and that was the gunshot sound. There's all sorts of examples. But basically, feel free to get creative and record stuff to replace the sounds, and that includes dialogue. Dialogue is harder to fake in post because it mightn't actually line up. But when something is just a thud, it's easier to replace that because you can just get the sound of something else hitting. Same with footsteps. You can, because a lot of the time you don't see like from waist or knee down, so the footsteps don't have to hit absolutely perfectly. You can still tell from shoulders when the feet are hitting, but not as much as when you can see the feet touching the ground. So you have that flexibility. There's a lot of fun can be done in post sound. I've personally had a lot of fun doing it. Re-recording footsteps with my friend on one of his films, it was just intriguing. I haven't done much of it myself, but it was a fun experience and I recommend it. There's other things in sound. There's music. There is websites that have loads of public domain music that you can just download and just put in your film, ready made, for all sorts of different genres or tones. Talking about tone and music. When I say tone, I don't mean like literally like a note. I'm talking about like mood kind of thing. So if something super exciting is happening on screen, you want music that is kind of reflects that. If you have something that's kind of more like calm and serene, you want something more calm and serene. There is a lot of like people starting films, they're like, this film isn't exciting enough because I have not put exciting things on screen, so I'm just gonna pump in the music from some blockbuster into it and hope it makes it exciting. It won't work. It'll just make it seem even more amateur and by extent even more boring because they're just there like the audience will know what you're trying to do and it will seem bad. Other bits of post. So after sound, there's a thing called color grading, which I'm not really going to get into because it's kind of more. It's more important on higher end cameras, but it's basically it's color correction. You are changing the color slightly to give it its own aesthetic. A lot of Hollywood movies also use it to like say pretend that the film is set elsewhere. For some reason they make Mexico look kind of weird and yellowy, orangey, brown. But yeah, don't need to get into that here. One thing I will say, and it's just real quick, titles. Titles, both credits and beforehand. Fonts. You probably don't want to go with your default on your computer or on your phone fonts because everyone has seen them 100 times. If you have a title and you want people to be like, oh, I recognize that font, you're gonna go looking for a font. You can hand draw a font and scan it in, and that can be your title and edit in Photoshop and all that, and it can look great. But there's free font websites, just like there's free music websites. Regarding the actual end credits, avoid scrolling credits for a simple reason. Doing them cheaply, they don't look good. Basically, in professional filmmaking, they are made by they're outsourced to basically a graphic designer that makes something with vectors. The ones that you make at home are more pixel based, So they kind of just chug down the screen, and it's just going and looks terrible. What really works for short films is just flashing it up, especially on a title. It's just there like, and I love putting the title at the end of shorts. So you have the story film, and then suddenly there's a title flashing up, and you're just like, yes, that is the right title for this film. Other bits of post. Yeah, sometimes in post you realize you're missing something. You overlooked something while shooting, and you're thinking, "Oh, I wish I got this shot." Like if your actors are and your family members, go back and reshoot it. It's not that big of a deal. If you have a prop and it gets destroyed, and then the scene is before that needs a prop, you're kind of out of luck unless you can replace the prop. But generally, if it's just people having conversation and easily re-replicated action and dialogue, then go for it. Do it. Just be careful with continuity. Right, I realise that this has all been very lectury, and it's meant to be a workshop. So I'm going to end all this with kind of a list of things that I think you should just go off and do. Not necessarily, obviously, top of that is go make a film with all of the advice I gave you. But beyond that, I'm including kind of a list of resources on the bottom. So go read through that and have fun with it. But that's not really an activity that's super fun. I've included a couple of scripts. Not sure if I'm going to do 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, but probably 2. These scripts you can read and check and have a look through and use it to understand formatting a bit better. You can take these scripts and turn them into a film. They're written to be easy to do at home with a limited cast. Honestly, take photographs because that will help composition. You'll improve your eye for it. And most importantly, I want you to watch between 1 and 3 films pretty shortly after this. And I want you to kind of watch them by take them apart while you're watching them. So I want you to think about how they're handling exposition, how the film is kind of giving you the information of the story, how the act, like when one act is ending and the next one is starting, who the antagonist is, who the protagonist is, kind of like what's under the hood of the film, like what ideas are in the film beyond just this character has to do this thing, but like there's usually a subtle meaning behind films. Think about that. Just think about film in general while you're watching it, because first of all, it'll give you drive to be like, oh, I can see how this is done better. I want to go make a film. It'll give you a better understanding and it'll give you a drive to make films. So that's kind of what I want to leave you with, is that just watch the film and take from it what you can. Right, I'm going to sign off. My name is Fergal. Again, still is. I'll leave some stuff in the description, so please look through it and enjoy your journey in filmmaking.